Good morning. This webinar offers closed captioning. To enable closed captioning, click on the live transcript button on the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred method. Welcome to the Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. Please note any website or email that I mentioned will be posted in the chat box. For those seeking business license assistance, you can visit the Small Business Center at City Hall or call 312-74-GO-BIZ. Also, business license can be applied for or renewed online at chicagobusinessdirect.org. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about this program, please visit chicago.gov/business education. This webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. We'd like to encourage all attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box to send your questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. At this time, I will now turn this webinar over to Kimberly for us to begin.
Good morning, and thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for attending the webinar today. My name is Kim Brisky, and I am the Managing Director for Communications and Engagement at SomerCor. For those of you who may not know us, SomerCor, we are a nonprofit lender certified by the SBA, the Small Business Administration, for SBA 504 loans. Those are loans for the purchase of fixed assets like commercial real estate and heavy equipment. But we also administer the Small Business Improvement Fund, which has been in operation since 1999, as well as the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, and that's going to be the focus of the conversation today. Our mission is to grow business, create jobs, and increase impactful investment in every community through access to capital. So if you ever want to learn more about what we do, you can just go to www.somercor.com to learn more. Again, I do encourage everyone, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. Since I'm covering two programs today, I might take a quick pause in the middle to see if there's any good questions on the first program, and then we'll kind of roll into the next. I'm going to turn off my video for now, and we'll get started. So as I mentioned, we're going to cover two programs today, both the Small Business Improvement Fund, known as SBIF, as well as the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, known as NOF. You can see here the basics that we're going to cover for both programs are the mission, the parameters of the grant, eligibility rules, how you can use the funds, a couple of sample projects to get you inspired, as well as some tips and tricks for the application and available resources for everybody that's interested in applying. So let's start off with the Small Business Improvement Fund. This was launched in 1999, and the focus is helping economic development by providing small businesses and certain nonprofits. And you can either be both the small business tenant or the building landlord with a reimbursable grant for permanent building improvement costs. Again, this is a reimbursable grant. It can only be used for permanent building costs. So things like inventory and working capital are not eligible. Similarly, residential projects are not eligible. SBIF uses tax increment financing, or TIF, revenue to reimburse grantees for their approved rehab and other items that they are actually approved for prior to starting the work. Again, SomerCor is the program administrator contracted by the Chicago Department of Planning and Development. So the first question we typically get is, what is the maximum amount of grant that can be provided? Again, this is a reimbursable grant. So the maximum amount is $250,000 for an industrial property. It's $150,000 maximum for a single owner tenant commercial property. It's also $250,000 maximum may be granted to something that's a multiple owner or a multiple tenant commercial property. And then each individual tenant can get up to $75,000. Applicants can receive one or more grants up to their maximum program assistance. So let's say you, the first time around, you only want to do a project that's $100,000, but you're eligible for $150,000. You can also come back again and we can do another project for up to $50,000. If after 3 years, that maximum grant amount resets. As I mentioned before, this is a reimbursable grant. And because it's reimbursable, it's reimbursable up to 90% If your business has between 0 and 3 million in net worth or sales, you'll be reimbursed for up to 90% of the eligible project costs. Between 3 and 6 million, 60%, 6 and 9 million, up to 30%. If you're an industrial business across the board, you'll be reimbursed for 50% of all eligible costs. So now we know how much money you will be able to apply for. Let's talk about who would actually be eligible. The most important factor that usually easily tells you whether or not you're eligible to apply is geography. The property must be in a TIF district where there are SBIF funds available and authorized to actually start taking the applications. As a reminder, the SBIF grant actually every month opens certain areas for 30 days for application. The landlords can apply on behalf of their tenant or on their building for either commercial or industrial properties. A business owner who's commercial or industrial, who either leases their place of business or actually owns it. A tenant can apply as long as they have written approval from their property owner, and even startups can apply, but you will need to have a Chicago business license and a business plan. As a reminder, in terms of those who are eligible to apply, if you are a commercial tenant or an owner-occupied commercial space, you have to have average of 9 million or less in gross sales per year. If you're a landlord for either commercial or industrial, not only the 9 million less cumulative net worth, but also for an individual 500,000 or less liquid assets per individual. An industrial tenant or an owner-occupied has to have 200 or fewer full-time employees. And all owner-occupied properties are subject to both tenant and landlord requirements. If you have questions about this, we're always happy to review your financial statements once you actually apply. So we know right now sort of what the eligibility rules are. We know how much financing you could potentially receive. But the first question is really, is your business or property in a SBIF district? We have a website to help you determine that. Again, the districts actually for SBIF span the entire city from north, south, and west sides. You're able to visit www.SomerCor.com/SBIF to see if your property is in a SBIF district. All you have to do is click on number 1, confirm your business is in a SBIF district. It will take you to our SBIF locator tool. There, all you have to do is enter the address and this screen will pop up. This particular address, for example, shows that the property is located in a particular TIF, the 79th Street corridor. It shows when the actual area will be opening for applications, and it provides contact information for delegate agencies who can assist with the application. This is a tool that is open and out there for anybody to check their properties. If you have any questions about this, you're welcome to contact SomerCor. So now we know how you can check whether or not you're actually in a district. What about whether or not your district is actually open? As I said before, each month marks a new 30-day period in which SBIF districts with available funds are open for application. This means that if you're in a SBIF district, you are not able to just apply at any time. You're only able to apply during the 30 days where your district is open. If you apply outside that 30-day period, your application will not be accepted. If you're trying to figure out when your district is going to be opening, you can actually check out our website here. You can also sign up for our SBIFgram e-newsletter. You can also check with your aldermen who also are made aware. All you have to do is go to www.SomerCor.com/SBIF, click on number 2, check which SBIF districts are open. And that will take you to the website on the right there that lists the district name, the date it's opening, the date it closes, as well as a link to the actual district map so you can confirm that your property is located within the TIF district. Alrighty, so now we've already covered the maximum grant amount. We've covered how you know if you're actually in a TIF district, and we've covered which type of folks can actually apply. Let's talk about the actual businesses and organizations are not allowed to apply. for most small business retails and restaurants and things like that are eligible, but there are some things that are specifically prohibited. This list is not comprehensive, but it gives you a pretty good picture. We are talking about chain and franchise businesses, pawn shops, nightclubs, K through 12 schools, non-for-profits that have a national affiliation, places of worship, things like that are not going to be eligible. If you're not sure whether or not your business is eligible, feel free to reach out to SomerCor and we're happy to check. On a more positive note, let's talk a little bit about what types of repairs and improvement costs are eligible for SBIF funding. On the right there, you see a pretty cool example for Brewer Coffee and Custard. That's on the 79th Street corridor TIF. You can see before and after we did the whole frontage for them. And actually you can't tell, but the entire interior also was a build out. So things that you're able to use the funds for: the roofing, facade, signs or awnings that are permanently affixed to the building. If you need to do any improvements to meet ADA compliance, like railings or ramps, HVAC, plumbing, heating, electrical. If you need to do architectural and construction fees are related to actually project management, certain environmental remediation fixtures, permanent interior renovations like the build out that we just discussed. Also the purchase of adjacent land parcels for expansion or parking. Again, this list is not comprehensive, so we are happy to assist with determining whether or not some of the improvements that you're looking at are going to be eligible. But let's talk about the things that would not be eligible. Anything that's new construction from the ground up, a standalone minor cosmetic improvement, equipment related expenses, kitchen appliances, computer, furniture, any planters, and then the big one, outdoor dining, drinking areas like roof decks, beer gardens, outdoor patios, porches, decks, those will not be eligible. And I think the key thing to be thinking about here is that the SBIF grant is focused on permanent building improvements. So when we talk about equipment or fixtures, if you can actually, wheel it out of the building, that's not going to be considered permanent. So that will not be accepted. Additionally, if you're just trying to do a cosmetic, like, hey, I just want new flooring and new coat of paint, but it isn't part of a bigger project, that's not going to be eligible. Again, the list is not comprehensive, but if you have additional questions, you're welcome to reach out to SomerCor for more information. So we've talked about, again, the maximum grant amount, who is eligible, finding out whether or not you're in a SBIF district. We've talked about the different types of work that will be acceptable and not acceptable. But what about design requirements? The Department of Planning and Development does really want the grant funds to go towards projects that have an eye towards design and fitting in with the neighborhood guidelines and sort of what is already there to fit the vibe. Applicants are really strongly advised to consult with us at SomerCor and design professionals to review the design requirements before you actually draw up the plans for work. And there actually is a link on the bottom there, which I will make sure that this presentation is available for everybody so you can review the DPD design guideline. Another key component to make sure that the SBIF grant is not only used to improve the individual business, but also to support the entire commercial corridor. All applicants for commercial properties who are approved for a grant of $25,000 or greater will have to be making at least one exterior improvement using at least 10% of the maximum grant amount of their grant. So if you're going to be using, receiving a grant of at least $25,000, you will have to have some type of exterior element. This might be new windows, doors, dealing with masonry, tuck pointing, things like that, that will improve the appearance not only for the small business owner, but also for the commercial corridor as a whole. This is a great opportunity to check out some of our SBIF sample projects that are great success stories. This is in the Bronzeville TIF, Emiche Cakery and Cafe. As you can see here, the before and the after. Before, totally gated, really lacking personality on the front, and the inside was an empty shell. The after picture is quite a transformation. It really has a lot of personality and build out, and I know that this location, it does actually provides a lot of the treats that I've been to at some events. They're a great catering and walk-in spot. So if you're interested and in Bronzeville, definitely stop by. Here's another really awesome example on the Madison-Austin corridor TIF district, Wiley's Chicken and Ribs. Again, you can see the front of the building was pretty boarded up, not much character, and inside was basically an empty shell. With the SBIF grant, they were able to do the new windows and door storefront system on the exterior, and interior, they actually did the full build out with the counter and kitchen to be able to serve customers. So if this presentation kind of meets your expectations for SBIF and you feel like you meet the requirements and you're interested in applying, here's how you do so. At this time, all you have to do is go to www.SomerCor.com/SBIF, and you actually click on the application to download it. All you have to do then is fill it out and email it to SBIF@SomerCor.com within the designated period for your district. Again, you can only apply for SBIF when your district is open for new applications. When you're applying for SBIF, you don't actually have to have all of these documents ready to attach with the application. But once you hear from the SomerCor team and are assigned a project manager, they're going to be asking you for these types of documents. So it's important to actually get a head start on finding them. These are pretty typical for anywhere that you would be looking to access capital. So we're going to be talking about your tax returns, your business license, personal financial statements, either a lease agreement or a deed, things like that. So again, while you don't need them when you're actually submitting the initial application form, you will need them throughout the process. So if you need to start now to get them together, that's a good place to start. This gives you a pretty good overview of the SBIF application process. So in stage one, once you've submitted the application, you've heard back from a SBIF project manager, all the documents that we mentioned on this page, you'll be able to finish compiling those for the first 20 days. Stage two is when you're actually going to be putting together your design plans, getting some bids, and debts are cured. I'm going to stop here to talk a little bit about what that means by debts are cured. SBIF applicants, once they apply during this stage two, they actually are submitted for a scofflaw check, and all SBIF grantees have to first be up to date on their property taxes and their child support payments. And if you do have other scofflaw debt to the city, so that might be parking tickets or water, utility bills, things like that, for those other debts to the city, as long as you set up a payment plan or pay it right then, you'll be able to continue with the project. But the city of Chicago does require that you either pay at that time or submit to a payment plan to be considered cured to start the project. Once you finish both stage 1 and 2, you will receive your conditional commitment letter. That's the signal you can begin construction. If you did any construction before that point, that work will actually not be eligible for reimbursement. The only work that will be eligible for reimbursement is approved work that is started after you receive this conditional commitment letter. Then comes stage 3, and that's where a lot of the action is. That's the 10-month period where first you're going to have to not only do the actual construction itself, but within that 10-month period, within the first 120 days, you'll have to submit to SomerCor both proof that you applied for your permits, as well as proof during stage 3.4 that you have sufficient funds to complete the project. So that's going to mean you need to show that you have at least 50% of the funds accessible to cover the total project costs. Stage 4 is the reimbursement phase. This is when you have completed the project, You will sign and review all the closing documents, and you will then be actually have a site visit from a member of the SomerCor team. At that point, if the SomerCor team deems the project to be complete, they will submit a voucher to the Department of Planning and Development for processing, and you will receive payment in 4 to 6 weeks by check. So for folks who perhaps have never done a construction project before, or maybe need help in actually building out a business plan to make sure that this type of improvement works for your business, we've got quite a few resources on the SomerCor webpage to help you. This is going to include the design guidelines that we talked about earlier, a list of lenders who have helped other SBIF participants before, technical assistance providers like project managers, as well as a list of contractors who have participated in SBIF projects before and understand the program. And here is a list of the entire SBIF team that can be of assistance to you during this process. I'm going to leave this up here for 1 second. We've got the phone numbers and the website addresses. And then I will take a quick look and see if anybody has a SBIF specific question. You're welcome to put it in chat. I'm happy to answer those questions at this time. Let's see. Okay, the first question I see is, do you work with nonprofit companies? And the answer is yes. Some specific nonprofits can actually be eligible for a SBIF grant. This would be somebody, I think I mentioned earlier, that if you work for a nonprofit that has a national presence, then your nonprofit will not be eligible. But otherwise, you're welcome to submit, and I'm happy to check their eligibility. But if you have a national presence for your nonprofit, you will not be eligible. But otherwise, we certainly do help quite a few nonprofits. Another question was, will districts be open more than 1 month a year? So the way that districts are determined when they're open is it's on a couple of different factors. One, is there money available in that district? And two, has there been interest shown by applicants that people want to actually apply for that area? Typically, districts are not open more than 1 time a year. But there actually is that full list that you can review at www.somercor.com/SBIF. It actually shows the full year of 2023, what the scheduled SBIF district openings are. So at this time, if you notice that your SBIF district is not open for applications, you can send us an email and say, hey, I'm really interested in this program. And it actually is helpful to us and the city. If we see that a lot of folks are interested in a particular area, then we want to make sure that we can support an opening of that in the future. Okay, so we have a couple of questions here. Are businesses that have received other climate grants, like the Climate Infrastructure Grant or Chicago Recovery Grant, or I would even put the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund grant, are they eligible? So what I say is that you are eligible to apply for all of these grants, but at the end of the day, when you're actually doing the work, you can only pick one to actually use the funds for. And that's because you have to be able to show that you actually are being reimbursed for specific work. And a lot of times these grants could potentially cover the same type of work. So it's really important that, for example, we've had folks that apply for SBIF, they apply for NOF, and if they get accepted into both, then they have to pick one to actually move forward with the project. Somebody said they don't see their TIF district on the list. Does that mean it's already past the deadline or it's not available? If you don't see your TIF district on the calendar list, the rollout schedule, that just means it's not scheduled at this time to open in 2023. As I said before, send us an email to let us know you're interested. And not only does that help us gauge which districts need to be open next time, you'll actually be entered into our database to receive an email notification when that area does open. Somebody did ask about the NOF and SBIF. Somebody asked, can you help I need help with my business plan. So for folks that are interested in other types of business resources, feel free to send me an email, and I'll actually put my email in the chat box here for everybody if they need it. And they can feel free to send me an email, and I'm happy to connect them with some other resources. Or you can also, again, go to the website to look at our resources posted there. Are district boundaries set in stone? What if an address falls right outside the district? That's a great question. Yes, the district, I wouldn't say set in stone, but that's not something that at SomerCor that can be changed. If you look up and you see that your district is right across the street, or your address is right across the street, unfortunately, that district is where it is set. TIFs are interesting because it's both a combination of state law and the city working together to create those districts. If you're interested in trying to change the SBIF district, my encouragement is for you to talk to your alderman to see if they can advocate on your behalf. Let's see, Fullerton, Milwaukee. Yeah, I recognize that district. I don't believe that is opening in 2023, but again, feel free to send us an email and we can add you to our list. Somebody asked, is this a matching grant? No, it's a reimbursable grant, meaning that you will be reimbursed up to 90%, assuming you meet the criteria that we talked about in the beginning to actually do the work. So, but you don't necessarily have to have 100% of the work, or excuse me, 100% of the funding available. Here, I'll put my face on the screen. It's not a matching grant, it's a reimbursable grant. So let's say you're working on a project and the full project is approved for $150,000. You don't have $150,000 upfront, which is fine. The SBIF program only requires that you're able to show financing, the access to financing for 50% of it. But the way that you could actually do the project is in phases. So perhaps the project requires, we need a new roof, we need a new storefront system, and we need new HVAC. What you can do is do the roof part of the project first, submit all the paperwork, get reimbursed that money back, and then move on to do the storefront, get reimbursed again, and then go do the HVAC and then come back. So that way that you're not required to outlay the entire $150,000 as you're doing the work. So if you apply prior to the end of the open period, does the application have to be complete or get in time? So in terms of the application process, so it's not first come, first serve. SBIF is a grant that it's not competitive either. If you meet the application criteria and there's funds available, you will be considered in that group of folks that are eligible to apply. We don't look at any applications until the end of the month, until the application time closes. At that point, we review everybody to determine whether or not you're eligible. For those that are eligible, we say, okay, how much money do we have to be able to send out to these folks and actually start working on their projects? If it turns out that we have more interest than funding available for a particular district, we'll do something called a lottery, which means it's just like what it sounds like. It's a lottery. We'll put everybody in a randomizer and we will start working through the list in that order to do those projects. That lottery list is going to stay good for 2 years. So you don't have to do anything for those 2 years. If somebody drops out of the program or we end up getting more funding for that area, then we'll continue to go through that list in that order. Somebody said, let's see, startup qualifications. Oh, so somebody was asking if the startup qualifications to be able to apply for SBIF. Really, the key about a startup qualification is, do you have the business license? Do you have a business plan? Can you provide projections for 3 years there? Because you won't actually have business financing. If you can do that, then you'll be able to try to move forward. Let's see, if a property owner, let's see, somebody asked the question, the property owner has a scofflaw violation, will that withhold the renter from receiving a grant? That's a good question. I'm actually not 100% sure. I think that that's something I'd have to look at, but I don't believe so. I'm pretty sure that if the tenant is applying, that the scofflaw check is on you as the tenant, not as the property owner. Minimum 3-year, yeah. So another question came through: are there business side minimums provided that you could provide the financing in terms of startups? Are there minimum 3-year projections? Yes. So for a startup, there is no business size minimum necessarily, as long as like you're using a permanent space. So this isn't going to be something, a home-based business isn't going to be eligible. If you actually have a commercial or industrial property that you're operating out of and you can show your projections, then you'll be in a good spot. All right, well, I think I'm going to hang tight on any other questions. We'll definitely have an opportunity to go through more SBIF questions after I do the NOF portion. I'm going to one more time, my email address is in there, but so I'll put it in one more time. And also I'll make sure the BACP has a copy of this presentation so that they can email it out to all the attendees today so that you can review them. All right, I'm gonna hop forward now and head over to do the NOF portion of this presentation. Thanks so much for all those great questions. So SBIF and NOF have some differences and some similarities. Similar to SBIF, NOF is focused on permanent building improvements for commercial corridors. Differently, you'll notice that the NOF does not allow for manufacturing. It is a competitive grant, meaning that it's not necessarily, it is geographically based, but there are also other factors that will determine eligibility. This grant program was launched in 2016, and it's specifically targeted for the South, Southwest, and West sides. And the way, as opposed to TIF districts, how the SBIF district works, how the funds are actually generated for this project is that there actually are developments in the loop, and there is a new density bonus that is actually charged for those who are doing those projects. 80% of those funds are designated for the NOF. And like the Small Business Improvement Fund, SomerCor is the program administrator that's contracted by the Chicago Department of Planning and Development. So there are two different types of neighborhood opportunity fund projects. There's a small grants track, which we're covering today, and the large grants. SomerCor does not administer large grants, so we'll not be covering those today. For the small grants track, the eligible projects that we're talking about are expansion or renovation for existing businesses, a new location for startup businesses of existing businesses, or a new construction actually at vacant properties. The grants here are up to $250,000. As I said before, it's a competitive selection process based on their application, and grantees are expected to complete their projects within 2 years. So let's talk about the breakdown of the grant funds, how much can be awarded, and how much is actually eligible for reimbursement. So here we have in the big yellow bar at the top, the total eligible project cost. So this is all the expenses that would be eligible for reimbursement by NOF. You can see in the blue grant that automatically for every applicant, 50% of the eligible project costs will be reimbursable. In the green box right here, it shows that if you also are a local resident, and I'll show the map on the next page here, if you're considered a local resident, that will add another 25% of eligible grant costs to be reimbursable, meaning 75% of your eligible grant costs will be reimbursable to you. And the last section here is if you actually have here, you see in the light green, the BCWB options, which are, these are the bonus, building community wealth bonus. If you actually, after the project is complete, hire locally from the area and the local resident area is required, you can actually be reimbursed for that final 25%, meaning eventually you could get 100% of your total eligible project costs reimbursed by the city. So, but the key note is this: You can't prove who you're hiring until after the project is done, you're actually already up and running. So even if you do get that final 25% reimbursed, you will have to be able to put that up front. So all applicants, regardless of whether or not they will be eventually eligible for the full 100% reimbursement or not, will have to contribute a minimum of 25% to the escrow system while completing their project. So I talked a little bit about the geographic requirements for NOF and the focus. So the map with the blue and red, this actually shows the NOF corridors that are the actual project addresses that will be eligible for NOF grant funds. You can see the focus on the south, southwest, and west sides. And there is a tiered system in terms of for the competitive application process, that if you're in a red corridor, an INVESTSouthWest corridor, that's going to be weighted the most. Then there's the priority investment corridor, as well as then eligible commercial corridors. If any of those colors correspond with your project address, you will be eligible for NOF. The other map, that's the yellow area, that's what's called the qualified investment area. So when I was talking about whether or not you can actually have the local bonus for yourself being a resident of that area, it's if you're a resident in any of that yellow area. Similarly for the local hiring bonus. So we know a little bit more about the parameters of the grant. Let's talk about who would be eligible to apply. So a commercial property owner with known business uses. So this is going to be, we don't want anybody to do a vanilla box project. By that we mean someone who is a property owner that just wants to, that just wants to come in and do work and make it a blank box with no tenant in mind. A commercial tenant can also participate in NOF with landlord approval, as well as certain nonprofit organizations that provide a revenue generating commercial activity to the public. We've had a couple of examples, Sisters in Cinema, which actually does like a historical museum, talking about the history of Black and minority women that actually working in the arts and cinema specifically. That one was eligible. Gallery 345 is another one, an art gallery as well. So that's sort of the question there about the nonprofits. Again, for folks that are not eligible, that's going to be residential properties, including home-based businesses, live workspaces. Unlike SBIF, which does allow for manufacturing, NOF does not. Manufacturing and industrial businesses and properties are not eligible for NOF. Social service organizations, including workforce development, schools, and daycare centers, those are also not eligible for NOF. Churches and places of worship, also not eligible for NOF. I do want to say one more time, in terms of daycare centers, we do get a lot of questions about that. SBIF applicants, they can be daycare centers. NOF applicants, they cannot. So just something to have in mind as you're deciding what project, excuse me, what grant might be the best fit for you. Again, this list is not comprehensive. So, if you're asking individual questions in the chat about my business, I will do my best. But if it may be best to send an email either to me or to my email that I put in the box to make sure we get the best answer to your question. So let's talk a little bit about the NOF use of funds. What actually would be eligible for your use of funds? So we're going to be talking about eligible expenses are going to be similar-ish to what you saw for SBIF. Major exterior and interior renovations, build outs, building acquisition, and the building acquisition only if it's part of the other major renovation project. The fees for engineering and architecture, roofing, masonry, facades, windows, doors, and mechanical systems we discussed before, security systems. Things that are not eligible. Minor repairs, like cosmetic, which we talked about, work on residential units if it's in a mixed use building, repairs to address building code violations, or working capital. Again, the NOF grant, like the SBIF, can only be used for permanent building improvements. Any working capital, inventory, business operating, that is not eligible. So here are a couple of really cool examples of NOF projects. This one in the Chicago lawn, area. You can see here before the frontage was really falling apart, and they did the full build out interior, but also the exterior, totally all the masonry, the signage, the storefront windows. It really made a difference on the street. Another example is Osito's Tap here in Little Village. You can see from before, this was totally outdated, empty, not used. And they actually were able to use this grant to create a really beautiful, almost speakeasy sort of in the Little Village area, which they didn't really have anything like this. And it's a great stop for the community to be able to go to. So if you're going to participate in the NOF project, these are sort of the expectations on the guidelines. For the first 3 to 6 months, you're going through, after you're selected as a finalist, when you're selected as a finalist, you're going through all the documentation, making sure you're finalizing your project scope. Once you are actually the grantee and you're working on doing the construction itself, and then afterwards you are considered an alumni and you actually get to participate in annual surveys and keep us posted on how you're doing. Grantees are expected to complete their projects in with 2 years. Loss of site control or delays could lead to revocation of grant awards. And I will say this for both NOF and SBIF, I can say this on behalf of all of our project managers, that we understand that things with construction happen. But the key is to keep us informed. Your project manager should always know if you're having an issue with getting your contractor to come to work, if you're having an issue getting supplies and materials, if you're having an issue getting your permit set up, if you're having an issue hearing back from the bank about your financing. That's helpful information. And as long as we are able to know what's going on, our hope is that we're able to help you navigate the process and get you through to the finish line. Our goal is to keep you in the program and make sure that you're successful completing the project. So NOF and SBIF, they have different application deadline rules. NOF, as I said, it's a rolling project. Every 30 days, there's a new set of districts that you can apply for. NOF, they're actually going to do, I believe, they usually do 2 to 3 openings. I believe this year they're going to do three openings for NOF, and it's open right now. The current deadline to apply is February 24th. Chicago.gov/NOF is a house for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, where you can learn more about, excuse me, the program, view the application. You can actually check to see if your property address is eligible. And since we know that the application process is open right now, I want to give you a couple of tips to try to help you make sure your project is chosen. As I mentioned before, NOF differs from SBIF, and that NOF is a competitive grant, meaning that we not only take your geographic location and the amount of funds available into consideration, but also the actual project itself. One of the key factors we look at is project readiness. Successful applicants must show sufficient planning to demonstrate the feasibility and applicants' readiness to begin as soon as possible. This means that just making sure that you actually have a plan. So a couple of things that are really critical is, number one, site control. I think I used that term before, so I'm glad I get the opportunity here to kind of dig in a little bit more about what that means. Site control means, do you have the lease if you're the tenant? Do you have the deed if you are the property owner? If not, can you actually show how you're going to get it? Sometimes we have folks that apply, just the timing of it works, that they're in the process of purchasing the space, but they actually don't have the deed in hand yet, but they already have a letter of intent from the current owner. That's going to be helpful for us. So that's the kind of thing that we need to see to make sure that you're actually going to have the ability and authority for that space to do this work. Do you actually have a plan for your construction? Do you use the applicant, having the actual say, this is what I want and this is why? Can you actually, have you already even started working with an architect or GC to develop a budget? And, have you actually started thinking about accessing the financing that you will need to have your actual money that you have to put in the escrow for this project? Again, you don't have to come up with the full $250,000 at the start to do all of the work, but you will need to have at a minimum 25% of the total eligible project cost to be able to do the work. Another tip, community engagement. Successful applications show knowledge of the neighborhood's unique needs and priorities and responds to the community's interests. So not only is this a project that you want to do, is this a project that fits well within the neighborhood where you're trying to do it? Have you actually, looked at seeing like what is actually the goal of the community? What are they working on right now? Have you actually engaged with other folks that are and other community leaders to see if this fits in with the bigger plan? Do you think it will be supported by local residents? And also, like, do you know if you're looking at the commercial corridor, does what you're doing fit in with the current amenities in the area? Are you going to be the sixth restaurant, in a string, or are you going to be bringing something that is not existing there yet and they might need? And also, are you, so making sure that you're fitting into the current needs of the area. Excuse me. And design impact. Again, for design, project design is critical to the success of not only the business, but makes a statement regarding the community in which it serves. Successful applicants have thought carefully about the design of their project and will engage with design professionals when appropriate. So, I think that when you're looking at your design for your space, does it fit in with the commercial corridor as it stands and actually works to improve it, that's committed to sort of the vibe of the community as it already exists? So again, I want to draw you to chicago.gov/NOF. That's where you'll find the application. Again, the deadline is February 24th. You'll also find resources for both during this applicant phase that we're in right now, as well as later on for grantees. You have community partner organizations that can help you apply if you are having trouble with that process, and those are linked on the website. They're all listed there. They have links to webinars like this one, so you could watch again, although from a few years ago, but it's about the same information. It has information and resources to help you understand site readiness, as well as resources for planning for financial feasibility and business planning. Additionally, the city of Chicago really wants to make sure that grantees have all the tools to successfully navigate this program and have actually approved professional technical assistance providers, architects, construction managers, and lending coaches to help NOF applicants and grantees. It's important to note that up to 95% of the cost of hiring these TAs can be applied and actually included in your grant award. So up to $25,000. So if you do use one of these technical assistance providers that have been approved by the city, you're able to get part of those fees wrapped into your grant amount, which is a really great benefit. Additionally, when you're working on NOF, you're going to have very direct access to the city when you're having questions about permits, timelines, inspections. As I mentioned before, keeping us in the know is helpful, and not only to us, but it's helpful to you. If you're trying to get a project across the finish line and aren't hearing from someone, you'll have access to experts to assist. So I wanted to make sure I provided here the contact information for our NOF team. And just as a reminder, I'm going to make sure that this full presentation is provided to the to the BACP to be able to actually post and share out via email so that you can all review this. Again, you also have my email in the chat box. So you'll be able to reach out to me and I can connect you with the right person to help. So I'm going to just take a drink of water and then I will start running through some of these additional questions that came in the chat box. If you have questions about SBIF from before or NOF, feel free to put them in the box, but just if they're specific to one of the programs, please make sure you specify which program you're asking about. All right, let's get started and see what we have. Questions. Let's see. Thank you. All right. So the question was for NOF large, who administers a large grant since we do not? I'm pretty sure on the chicago.gov/NOF website, there's the email. I think it's like literally NOF large. It's actually like done through the city. The thing about the large NOF grant is that you actually have to get city council approval. So it's definitely a different process to go through. I will, let me see if I put it on that page or not. If not, I will, it's not on this page, but it should be on the chicago.gov/NOF about grants page. The contact information should be there. Can a startup commercial business that follows the requirements? So NOF startups are eligible for that, making sure that you do have though your business plan, projections, business license, things like that. Is a home-based daycare eligible under SBIF? No, both SBIF and NOF, all of them are for commercial, at least commercial properties. There's no residential properties are eligible for these grant funds. Let's see, somebody wanted to go a little bit further through the local hiring bonus in more detail. How are those funds distributed? So again, so as we talk about the ways that the refinance is done. So let's say, for example, you've already completed the project. You've been reimbursed for 75%. Because not only did you get the base 50, you yourself are a local resident. And then you have the bonus of if you reimburse up to 25% again, if you actually have a local hiring. By local hiring, this means that you actually have somebody who is hired and is in the yellow areas here. And then you will actually have to submit additional paperwork proving that you have those folks on your payroll. They're going to be asking for things like the hiring documents that you showed with their information and being able to show those payroll. And once you're able to submit that to your project manager at NOF, they'll be able to submit to the city of Chicago, and you'll be again reimbursed as you had been for the other portions of your grant. If you have specific questions about that, you know, I can bring on, or I can connect you with our NOF project manager. But I think, you know, for most folks, it's always just important to know that you can't get reimbursed for the full 100% at the beginning. The maximum is that you have to at least know that you're going to have to be able to contribute a minimum of 25% into the escrow when you're starting the project, and you might be able to get that amount of those eligible project costs reimbursed afterwards if you're able to prove that you were hiring locally. Let's see. Somebody asked, this is a city program. Are you aware of programming in other areas like the south suburbs specifically? So this is only for the city of Chicago. That's correct. I don't know of anything offhand, but you're welcome to send me an email. I put it in the box. I can put it in one more time at the end. And you know, the good news is to kind of, I would say, is to reach out to your economic development office within your municipality. Go to their website and see if they have something like this. Some do have grants. It's just not going to be as elaborate as what we have here for the city of Chicago. Excuse me. For NOF, can you only apply during the opening period? Yeah, right now, this is the only period up through the 24th that we're accepting applications, but I anticipate that it will be opened again at least once, if not twice. Somebody asked, can I get reimbursed for work they already did years ago? Unfortunately, no. For both SBIF and NOF, the only way you can be, only work you can be reimbursed for is work that has been approved by your project managers through the Department of Planning and Development, and then the work goes after that. Any work that you've ever previously completed, even with receipts, you will not be reimbursed for. Some of these questions are very specific, so I'm just looking for, how do you find a qualified design professional? Great question. You know, I think we talked a little bit about how Both for SBIF and NOF, there's the list of qualified TAs that are technical assistance providers. They're on both of the websites that I provided in the presentation. So that's where I would start to be able to connect and look at architects that can maybe help you with that portion of the project. I think I've had a couple of questions about the before and after here. So with NOF, NOF is competitive. How do we make sure that the reviewers aren't, like what sort of criteria are they looking at? So I talked a little bit about some of the ways that you can show you're successful. So for the competitive aspect of NOF, obviously first you have the geography. The next is like the type of project that you're doing, and the key items that I talked about here are really what helps you get across the finish line to be, potentially selected. Your project readiness, how much you've engaged in the community, and the design impact. If you have worked on those before you get to the application process, that will be putting you in the best shape possible to be selected. Again, question about local residency, that's going to be determined by the qualified investment area maps that I showed. Again, people asking for the list of architects, contractors, contact information. All of those are on the websites that I have provided here, so that's great. Let's see. Is there a limited number of times you can apply to NOF? Obviously you want to be able to, not that I know of, obviously it's only every 3 years. So there's 3 application periods a year, so you can continue to apply. And I think honestly, if you do not get accepted the first time around, I think that's an opportunity to reach out to SomerCor, reach out to the city with questions and say, how could I have improved my application process to be more successful? And I take that as an opportunity, because there will be another one, a couple months down the road to apply to GAMP. Somebody wanted to know if there's a way to show the application website and is there somebody that can help me with the application process? Again, I encourage you to go to, excuse me, chicago.gov/NOF. Listed on there is actually the 40+ delegate agencies who are assigned to help folks with the actual application process. So I encourage you to reach out to them to be able to help you fill it out. Let's see here. How long does it take to get approval after an application is submitted? It's a good question, and it varies between the 2 programs. For SBIF, once the application period ends, about 10 days about afterwards, we hold the lottery to be able, if it's necessary, to determine what order the projects are reviewed in. And so usually within 2 to 3 weeks of the application period ending is when you'll hear from a project manager saying that they are ready to move forward with the next stage of their application. Excuse me. NOF, once, no applications are reviewed until the period closes. So the period doesn't close until February 24th. At that time, the applications are reviewed. And it's hard for me to give a ballpark, but I would say it takes at least a month to 6 weeks to review all of the applications, and then to be able to get the orientation materials together, but then you'll be contacted after that. Let's see. I think I'm trying to see if there's any other questions here. At the end of the day, my encouragement to you and all the attendees here today, if these grant programs sound like something you're interested in, that there are tons of resources, both with through the city of Chicago and through SomerCor to help you through this process. If you go, my first stop would always be to check out the 2 websites, the chicago.gov/NOF and then chicago.gov/SBIF. there you'll find many of the resources that we covered today, which are going to be who can help me fill out the application, who can help me, in terms of finding an architect, a construction person, somebody who's a lender that's worked on this before. Can I see the program rules? Things like that. Those will all be there. But if your question is still not answered, you're welcome to send me an email, and I'm going to try to help you connect you in the right direction of where you need to be going. But I always think that the first place to start is, if you currently don't have, a business plan that really outlines what you're trying to do with your business and grow, let's help you get there first. And then to help you really set you up for success with all the other things that you can do with the grant funding. And while SomerCor doesn't do the business plans themselves, we work with lots of great organizations in the Chicago small business ecosystem that can help you participate. Somebody asked what percentage of applicants get awarded. And that again depends on how much money is available for the grant. For NOF in particular, it depends on how much revenue was collected from the downtown development bonus. That will determine how many folks will be able to be awarded grants. Typically, rounds have seen between 23, 24 to 30 grantees be accepted from the pool of folks that apply. The other thing that's going on right now that, is good news for businesses that are working to apply is that there is the Chicago Recovery Plan and the other grants that they have that are similar, that are kind of going on at the same time. So perhaps there are multiple opportunities for you to try to get funding for your business, but for whichever one you're doing, the more that you can be better prepared to tell the story of your business, to talk about what you do and why this permanent improvement funding will support you and your corridor, the better. Somebody asked, is there a minimum grant? I don't know if there ever is ever written out minimum grant, but I think that if it's, if we've done grants sometimes for SBIF that have been, 15,000 or less for particular permanent building improvements. For NOF, I would think it's less likely that you're going to have a grant that's that small, just based on the competitive factors of it. But I would say if you're looking for permanent building improvement grant that's pretty small, if you're not eligible for a grant at this time, you may be eligible for a micro loan, which we don't do at SomerCor, but we work with a lot of other organizations. And that may be a better fit because it can be fast. You won't have to worry about the application process in terms of going back and forth with contractors. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to send me an email. I'm going to put my email one more time in the chat, and you can reach me there. But that's I think that the key is that right now there's lots of resources that are out there for folks. I think that that's a blessing and a curse of Chicago's. You've got a million places you can go, but it's also hard to find the right one that fits for you. So, I'm happy to take it on sort of personally, that if you're interested in learning more, reach out to me and I'll see if I can find the best fit for you for what you're trying to do now. And I think with that, just as a reminder, my plan is to send a copy of this PowerPoint presentation today to BACP to be able to email to everybody else here. I don't think we have any other questions, but I know that if you want to go back later, you will be able to view this webinar on the BACP YouTube page. I want to just throw my contact page at the beginning again, just so you guys can see me. I really appreciate y'all taking the time. I know this is a lot of information, but like I said, our goal is to get folks to the finish line with a successful project. And sometimes, there are other steps along the way that even if we at SomerCor can't help you with, we're happy to connect you with folks that can help. I see a lot of folks in here asking about where can I find business plan resource information. I'm going to again put my email in the chat box, just because that's probably the easiest way. I have sort of a template email that I send to folks saying, hey, here is a free resource that can help you with putting together your business plan and helping you get that together. It's not only a business plan, but it's also just a free business coach. I don't know if you knew that, but there are resources there that can be free one-on-one business coaching. So it's not only with your business plan, but how do I understand my numbers? So how do I know, like, what is a profit loss statement, things like that. They can also potentially help you with understanding hiring and other HR issues, and just, how to build like organization charts, things like that. So there are a lot of great resources out there. So I want to make sure to try to connect you. So, our boss here at SomerCor, at the end of the day, we're a nonprofit. We want to help as many people as we can. So if I can't help, I will do my best to connect you with somebody who can. And I do also want to say that BACP does an amazing job at providing webinars on all of these topics and connecting you with resources too that can help you with this. So feel free to check out their website too to make sure you're not missing some of the really great resources they have there. All right, I think I've talked enough. I appreciate everybody's time today, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you, Kim, for your presentation. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, get credit for today's webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about our upcoming webinars, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.